Entering Sunday's game against the Minnesota Timberwolves, the San Antonio Spurs only had 10 players healthy for the game. And by the time the buzzer rang, the Spurs were down to 9 healthy players, and they ended up winning the game by 9 points after they were 6-point underdogs. How's it going, everyone? This is Paul Garcia for Project Spurs, here to bring you a quick recap of this another win for the Spurs, their 5th win of the season in this early season in 7 games. So let's go ahead and get into this game, how it kind of developed and who ended up getting injured for the Spurs, unfortunately. All right, so here I have the just what the Spurs' lead was throughout the game. So Minnesota came out early, leading by 6, but then from there, the Spurs kind of held the lead at the midway point of every quarter and also at the end of every quarter. So some notes from the first quarter: Karl-Anthony Towns' cat was going off against the Spurs. He came out really strong with a really aggressive scoring quarter for Minnesota. The Spurs, though, aside from Cat going off, they played really good defense, and that was a trend that was going to continue throughout the game. Doug McDermott came off the bench with 6 points in that opening quarter. Second quarter comes, and the Spurs are up by 6 midway through, but then unfortunately another injury happens to the team. Blake Wesley, the backup point guard, ended up getting injured. He went to the locker room with the left knee injury, and then the Spurs rolled him out for the rest of the game. So from the second quarter, midway point on, the Spurs were left with just 9 healthy players for the remainder of the game. But the Spurs kept playing well. They went into halftime with the 10-point lead. Again, they played really good defense. They held Minnesota to just 24 points. Doug McDermott at the half had 11 points. In the third quarter, the Spurs just came out, firing. They came out with a 9-0 run to start the third quarter, which built their largest lead of the night, 19 points. Keldon Johnson had a 12-point scoring third quarter. He, he came up kind of lingering with an injury toward it looked like his left knee on a possession, but he stayed in the game and he kept playing and he remained on the floor throughout the night for San Antonio. Again, they played good defense there in the third, and then in the final quarter, this is when it got close for the Spurs. Minnesota started the fourth quarter with a 9-0 run. They got the Spurs' 19-point lead all the way down to 3 points. But as you see here, at midway through the fourth, the Spurs kind of they were able to weather that storm. They ended up with a 7-point lead midway through the fourth, and then in the final 5 minutes, the Spurs never let Minnesota get into crunch time. They got multiple stops on defense. Even though they struggled on offense, they executed and were able to score. And so they ended up walking off for this game with a comfortable 9-point win. So again, there's their 5th win in 7 games, which we'll get to in a little bit. As far as the leading scorers for San Antonio in this game, Keldon Johnson again, just continues to lead this team with Devin Vassell on the injured list for now. Keldon had a strong performance with 25 points. A lot of those coming in the second half, 15 points from the 3-point line. He continues to shoot the ball well from the outside. Doug McDermott off the bench with the season high 23 points. He matched his career high with 7 3-point makes and 21 points there from the 3-point line. Bates-Diop had a strong game scoring the ball. He started in place of Jeremy Sohan, who was out with flu-like symptoms. And Keita has 18 points, with 10 of those points coming being aggressive, driving toward the rim against Rudy Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns in the front court. Tre Jones, 10 points, especially 5 points there from the free throw line. And then you see the rest of the scorers there for San Antonio. As far as the Wolves, Cat was the leading scorer with 26 points, but again, he had a really strong first half and got a little quiet in the second half. The Spurs did a better job defending him. Anthony Edwards ends up with 18 points. Most of those points scored in the second half. He was really strong from the third quarter on, and then even now Reed was pretty strong for Minnesota there in the fourth. But again, the Spurs held on, and they held Minnesota to just 98 points. One of the key stats here that I want to talk about, I'll go into further detail, is the 3-point line battle. The Spurs outscored the Wolves 48-12, so they outscored them by 36 points from the 3-point line, and that's a big reason why the San Antonio won. We'll get to that in a bit here. All right, some standout players for San Antonio. This is when you take all the box score stats and kind of just plug them in and see, who ended up, standing out for San Antonio. It was Keldon Johnson, puts up 25, 6, and 8. Another really strong game, especially moving the ball. 8 assists for Keldon. I know he did have the 5 turnovers, but he also, had some steals. He had a block. Jakob Poeltl goes. He didn't score as much, just 4 points, but he ends up grabbing another strong game for him on the boards with 14 rebounds, 4 assists. He also had 3 blocks, so he was very active there near the rim. In the front court, Tre Jones with 10 points, 8 assists for San Antonio. Doug McDermott, like I mentioned, 23 points off the bench. He actually had a block there. That's one thing to know for Doug's defense. Bates-Diop with 18 points, 6 rebounds, and then that 1 assist. And then Romeo Langford, even though he didn't score like just 7 points, he was pretty active, and he did a really good job of guarding Anthony Edwards for those first 1 to 3 quarters. He was doing a really good job. He blocked Rudy Gobert on a layup attempt, and he just had a lot of multiple good defensive plays for San Antonio. He ends up right there. You can see his defensive stats: 7 rebounds, 2 steals, 1 block for Romeo Langford as starting 2 for San Antonio. And then Zach Collins off the bench there with 9 points. And then Malachi Branham made his rookie debut with 19 minutes. He scores 5 points. Just grabs 2 rebounds, 2 assists. And again, in just limited minutes there for Malachi Branham. And then, as we noted, Blake Wesley got injured in the game. As far as the shot breakdown for both teams, the Spurs did a great job, like I said, on defense throughout the night. In the paint, Minnesota only made 52% of their shots in the paint, which is that's not a top 10 field goal accuracy number from last year. When you look at all the teams last year, they really struggled from the 3-point line, and that was one of the areas where they dominated against San Antonio last week when they beat the Spurs. So they only made 14% of their threes, just 29% of their shots came from 3. So that's a battle you're going to take if you're San Antonio, letting Minnesota not take as many threes, and then. Yeah, so Minnesota ends up winning the 2-point battle by 32 points, and the Spurs end up winning the 3-point battle and the free throw line battle. As far as the Spurs, they're going to struggle with missing a lot, missing multiple players here. Probably, I think it was like 6 or 7 players they were missing tonight on the injured list, and so they did struggle at the rim. Just 46% of their shots went in near the paint, but it was really that 3-point shot that really kept them in this game and really kept the lead separated from Minnesota, where they make 40% of their threes. 47% of their shots came from 3, which is a new season high in terms of attempts, percentage of attempts from the 3-point line. And then as far as the break, both teams didn't get more than 20% of their points in the break. And then the turnover battle wasn't too bad. Points out turnovers, both teams didn't score too many points there. Let's keep going. All right, so now that the Spurs have been involved in 7 games, let's see, what stuck out on offense for them, compared to themselves, both good and bad. All right, so the good, this team is now 5-0 when leading by 10 points. So this team, when they build a double-digit lead, I know the team starts to slowly come back, but they're holding on to those leads for now, is what we're seeing in the early data from this team through all 5 of their wins have been when they've led by 10 points. That 3-point battle is just so important for San Antonio. They're continuing to shoot well from the 3-point line. They're now 5-0 when winning the 3-point line. Like I mentioned tonight, they won it by 36 points. Entering today's game, they were 11th in 3-point attempts, and also in the top 10 in 3-point makes and accuracy. So again, this team, it's 5 games. I know it's a small sample size. Well, actually, it's 7 games. 7-game sample size. But right now, they're showing that this is, that's going to be part of their shot arsenal. And if it is, that's going to lead to a lot more success continued throughout the season if they continue to win that 3-point battle against their opponents. One thing you want to give them credit to, considering that they had a lot of different players who haven't played a lot, such as Romeo Langford, Malachi Branham got thrown in there, just like a lot of different players. Bates-Diop got a lot of minutes. They actually avoided crunch time. They were able to get stops down the stretch in the final 5 minutes, and they were able to execute a little bit on offense. And so again, you want to give them credit, the fact that a lot of these wins, aside from 2 of them, are coming because the Spurs are able to kind of execute and get those stops down the stretch and not having to sweat those wins out, and they're able to avoid crunch time. So again, you want to give credit to a young Spurs team there. And then also they had 14 offensive rebounds, which ties their season high. So they were good at crashing the boards, like I mentioned. The only bad, and this is kind of expected, like I mentioned, was they shot 46% of the paint against the Timberwolves. Rudy Gobert's on the other end. There's a lot of players who are getting minutes that don't normally play this many minutes, so it's expected. They tied their season low. And then of course the turnovers we're expected. I mean, new players getting more opportunity, more responsibility, that haven't been playing a lot this season, and so they end up with 20 turnovers on the night. But overall, they had a good night offensively. Here's where they really stood out. This is one of the key reasons why they won this game. It was their defense. They had their best defensive game of the season tonight. So let's just go through a lot of the numbers, the good compared to themselves, San Antonio. They held Minnesota below 30 in every single quarter tonight. That's the second time they've done that against an opponent. They held Minnesota below 25 in every quarter. That's the first time they've ever done that against any opponent. And Minnesota becomes the first team that the Spurs have held below 100 points in a single game. So that's the first time they've done that this season against any opponent. Like I mentioned, last time the Wolves last week scored 60 points from the 3-point line against the Spurs. Tonight they really struggled. They only made 4 threes, so 12 points from the 3-point line. They shot terrible, 14% accuracy. The Spurs did a great job of not putting the Wolves on the line too much, and so Minnesota only got 14 made free throws against San Antonio. The Spurs were very active, around the rim. They had 14 blocks. Not 14, 7 blocks, should I say? And again, 2 notable blocks that came were one from Romeo Langford. He actually blocked a Rudy Gobert dunk attempt near the rim, and then also that one where Langford. Oh no, somebody, who was it? Someone blocked a Rudy Gobert attempt at the rim. I don't remember. It wasn't Langford, but Langford blocked the layup. That was another player. I'm sorry, my mind just went blank. Anyway, one of the Spurs players blocked Gobert at the rim in this game. And then 29% of their shots, Minnesota only took 29% 60% of the shots from three. So again, when a team's made 60 points from you from the three-point line, you don't want them shooting a lot of threes. And so Minnesota didn't shoot as many threes as they did last week at home against the Spurs. And then the only areas where the Spurs struggled was 64 points in the paint, and then for Minnesota, and then 17% of the points from the fast break for the Wolves. But again, the Spurs, overall, they had their best defensive game of this early season, considering they were missing so many players. Just some notable notes that I wanted to bring up, some tweets, and then also I'll go over a poll review from this past week. So Jordan Howenstein, the Spurs is one of the Spurs' PR personnel. He tweeted this after the game where the Spurs won. His tweet says, "The Spurs start the season 5-2 for the first time since 2018-19." So that just tells you the kind of start that this team is on, considering that this is a team that was expected to have the worst record in the league, with just 22 wins this season. They're now just 17 away from that mark already for that over-under from Vegas. And Jordan also mentions here it's the second best start in San Antonio franchise history. Their best start was 6-1, and they never started season 7-0. So again, this kind of gives you just a little bit of context. I know it's only 7 games, but it just shows you the kind of start this has been for San Antonio early on in the season. And then as far as the week 2 poll that I usually do these on Sunday nights when I kind of look at the Spurs' schedule for the upcoming week. And then, if you follow me on Twitter, you're able to vote in that poll. And so I want to give a shout out to the 7% of people who voted for the Spurs to go 3-1, because that is what they did. They beat the Wolves on Monday last week. They lost to the Wolves on Wednesday. They beat the Bulls on Friday, and then tonight they beat the Bulls on Sunday. So again, the lowest number there, 7%, but they got it. Those voters got it right against Spurs. Surprisingly went 3-1. Again, I wouldn't have picked 3-1 if I was allowed to vote in this poll. I would have probably been in the camp of like 1-3 or 0-4. And so again, that just shows you the kind of how the Spurs are defining expectations right now with this start for them this season early on through 7 games. All right, and then lastly, up next for the Spurs, since it is a Sunday night, let's just look at the week ahead. From Monday all the way through Sunday next week, the Spurs get some time off, and that's good because, like I said, they have multiple players on the injured list, so this gives a lot of those players time to recover. The Spurs have 2 days off. It's been a while since they've had 2 days off so far this early season, so they're gonna get Monday and Tuesday off, and then Wednesday they host the Toronto Raptors, who are 3-3. So they're not quite off to a great start for Toronto. Even 500 ball club, expected to do a lot better. They also get the Clippers on Friday, who are also struggling, who are 2-4 right now, dealing with some injuries, but also they had just lost on Sunday. I remember watching them. I don't remember who beat them, but they had lost that game. I was watching it earlier, and so the Clippers are off to a slow start. So that's a good opportunity for San Antonio to try to get a win on Friday against one of the better teams expected to be in the league. And then on Saturday, the Spurs go on the road, back on the road. This time on the second night of a back-to-back, they're going to be going to Denver, and Denver's off to a 4-2 start as of Sunday evening. So, that's where things stand. The Spurs again continue to defy expectations in this early season. Now 5-2 to start the year. Project Spurs. I am Paul Garcia.